Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a post on physics education. It's called Jocularity, Jocks, Jokes, and Jackson's E&M. A friend sent me an interesting representation of the jock culture of physics and mathematics. It is a video interview between two guys who did PhDs in physics and mathematics on two opposite coasts of the US. One became a surfer after getting lucky with a bet on Apple stock, and the other became a financier who works for Peter Thiel. They shared an interest in fundamental questions in physics, and the financier set out to undermine the surfer's claim to have constructed a valid theory of everything. For the first 10 minutes of the video, to me, these guys just looked like they were bragging about how manly and brave one has to be to tackle the problem of constructing a theory of everything, and how one must be an egomaniac to even attempt such a feat. It looked like a lot of chest thumping to me, and I had a hard time forcing myself to keep watching after seeing that. My friend assured me that this sort of behavior is perfectly normal for men. It is how they establish camaraderie. Now, I spent a lot of time within the physics community, but I was kind of excluded from these sorts of interactions, even though they probably were happening all around me. I just wasn't part of them. So when I see this sort of dynamic, I see Maverick and the Iceman competing to see who is Top Gun in a movie I saw when I was a child. And I realized that I really do not understand men. Or at least I only understand men when they are acting like women. When, for example, if they put on a dress and said, "Please love me and don't attack me." I get that. I did watch the 2-hour video to the end, and I recorded a timeline of their discussion. So I'll try to play two characters and summarize what I saw. So, let's see. It takes a lot of confidence to make a theory of everything, because the institution as a whole attacks anyone who attempts to solve long-standing problems. General relativity and quantum mechanics have very different cultures and approaches, and this makes unifying them even more difficult. In the 1980s, the charisma of Edward Witten brought about the quasi-religious belief in the potential of string theory to unify general relativity and quantum mechanics. But today, we view the effort as pointless because none of the ideas can ever be tested experimentally. Theoretical physics gave birth to all of our technological developments, and it attracted the best people, rewarding intellectual achievement like no other field. The field attracted people who often lack social abilities, but physics is the best, most ambitious, pure, universal, and difficult thing that humans do, and we are close to having the source code of the universe so that we can commune with aliens? There are others who believe in the anthropic principle. They say that we just pick and choose the mathematics that we find most aesthetically pleasing and then use those pretty pieces to construct our favorite theories. The anthropic principle I find particularly cowardly. To me, the pattern at the fundamental scale appears complete and beautiful, except for dark matter and spinors, those weird things that execute a revolution in 720 degrees instead of 360 degrees. Mathematicians claim that they make perfect sense, but physicists often just accept them without knowing what they mean. I explained spinors with an incredibly complicated, beautiful mathematical object that is what everything is made of, and it connects to a theory of everything because gravitational charge isn't just mass, It's spin. I've taken something from the world of bosons, waves, and connected it to the world of fermions, matter, by constructing a mathematical object that makes the two worlds symmetrical, and I find this intensely stimulating and beautiful. Then I combine those mathematical objects into a 248-dimensional object that is even more beautiful. They fit together perfectly. So you found a way to transform bosons or waves so that they have the same properties as fermions, matter. You did this by multiplying them by spinors. It's a sort of transformation. But there is a huge problem with this approach. You can't extract any useful predictions from it that can be compared to other approaches. This spinor construction also lacks any acknowledgement of the asymmetry observed in nature, naturality, entropy, thermodynamics. You are correct that 248 dimensions isn't enough to describe this transformation from fermions to bosons, or the asymmetry. You need infinite dimensions, but that doesn't change the appeal of the beauty of this mathematical approximation. It is really unfair that string theory is allowed to have all of these obvious flaws, but anyone who uses a different language than they do is instantly excommunicated over flaws that are of a similar magnitude. I think I have created a consistent whole, a theory of everything. The problem with your theory is that our data doesn't come in infinite dimensions or 248 dimensions. It comes in 4 dimensions that we can break up into, say, 28 quantifiable properties. What do we learn from infinite dimensions or 248 dimensions? We learn to talk to aliens? Is that what this is all about? Beauty leading physics astray? A religion based on worshipping complicated mathematical objects and the men who constructed them? I'm not religious. I follow the ideas where they lead me. I attacked the geometry of quantum field theory, and no one has done this before. I was only able to do this because I have a healthy social support network and financial independence. Thank you, Apple. Within academia, I would have been under far more pressure to follow the group and the sources of funding that support the group. I have an estate in Neverland and invite physics friends out to discuss stuff. It's fun. I tried to solve this problem back in the early 90s from within the university system, and I was blocked at every turn. Then I gave up and went into finance. I've finally achieved enough financial freedom that I can pursue my old academic interests, but then I find that a surfer in Neverland has taken up the torch and claimed to have solved everything. This is frustrating. We are trying to build a framework that avoids no-go theorems, and we are trying to do so while confronted by hostile string theorists who are used to being the only game in town. But perhaps it is to be expected that theories in development must pass through no-go territory in order to arrive at a sufficiently complex and beautiful result that can be used to bamboozle the next generation of baby physicists. Which is what this is all about. I mean, we must maintain a system of tools that reliably crush even the strongest egos so that the older generation can maintain its position at the top of the monkey hierarchy. So that's the end of my interpretation of their video. I, of course, completely twisted their words, and I did not get the timing right, I'm sure, but I believe that the mood of the interview could be plotted out as a square wave. An engineer might call this waveform a sort of dither, but I just call it absolutely exhausting. Proof by exhaustion. It works in conference rooms across the world. Garrett, the surfer's triumphant epiphany that fermions are just bosons under a transformation involving spinors seems somewhat hollow and trivial to me, because matter, which is just a localized rotation, will clearly look like a wave, a non-localized rotation, if you change your perspective. And that is all that a spinor transformation does, moving the viewer's perspective to a more abstract, strange vantage that doesn't allow for useful connections to concrete, measurable concepts. So, we live in this world with measurable things where matter is matter and waves are waves, but using his transformation, you'd be living in a world where matter are waves and waves are matter, or somewhere in between. So, the other thing that was confusing to me was why they found spinors' properties counterintuitive, because I think they are perfectly intuitive. In order to conserve angular momentum, when a thing that is propagating in a volume gets trapped within a surface, it is going to have to rotate through 720 degrees rather than 360. This isn't mysterious. This should be intuitively clear. If one understands that a boson is a wave that moves a volume and a fermion is defined by a surface. Yet most physics students have become so detached from their intuition that they find such rotations mysterious. I suppose that I shouldn't be so mystified by what motivates men like Garrett the surfer. From a historical and psychological perspective, it is no surprise that someone will attempt to add another layer to the cake of physical abstraction. This is exactly what Hilbert space did with the Hamiltonian, and it is exactly what the Hamiltonian did with the Lagrangian. Why not add another layer? Baby physicists need things to occupy their time, and the Poincaré disk model is it's too simple and easy to understand. It's like a clock. Garrett's triumphant epiphany that gravity is spin also strikes me as hollow, because I'm okay with acknowledging that spinning things exert pressure that can be used to express gravity. Gravity, it makes sense to call it a sort of pressure. Newton tried to describe gravity as a pudding which pushes down with 1 over r cubed, and then you have rotation within pushing out with 1 over r. So this is a very old insight. Probably didn't even come from Newton, it probably came from his friend Hooke. But I think that this picture misses out on equipartition and thermodynamics. I would say rather that gravity is spin and vibration, but then I'd be playing his game, and I really just disapprove of the game in general. Spinning things look like they are vibrating when viewed from a certain vantage, after all, but what do we as a cultural entity really learn from insights like this? I think all we're learning is the limits of navel gazing. Based on the comments on their video, they do have an appreciative audience, so this form of entertainment still, it strikes a chord. But then again, audiences tend to cheer when they watch a person use obscure keywords that they recognize but don't fully understand. Just seeing the keywords makes them feel smart and connected, and oftentimes that's all an audience really wants. Just ask Patton Oswalt. He's a comedian and he knows a thing or two about how audiences think. I link in the blog post to a video of him describing what it was like to perform for an incredibly drunk audience. He had material, he could have used it, but they didn't really want anything very complicated. All they wanted was to shout out the sorts of movies he'd been in, and then have him say, yes, I was in that movie. They wanted him to stand on the stage and remind them of where they'd seen him before. That was it. And that may be our entertainment reflex in its most base form. And that applies to physics as well as comedy. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really enjoy watching Eric Weinstein's video because I don't like the jocular world that shaped their attitudes. It was, however, a fascinating look at two products of the US physics instruction system. They are highly confident in the value of what they worked very hard to learn, but also confident that more confidence is what is needed to make sense of the topic's absurdity. That might not be incorrect, but I find it instructive to compare these products of the system to a person who has not yet been inducted into the higher mysteries of the system. There's a young man named Andrew Dotson who has been YouTubing his thoughts about his physics PhD experience, and he has about as many viewers as Eric Weinstein. My oh my, how the internet flattens hierarchies. In his video, he talks about a book by Jackson on E&M, on electricity and magnetism. And this is a book that all graduate physics students know. And they all know on some level that the book is designed to reduce their confidence and establish their place at the bottom of the physics hierarchy. In Andrew Dotson's series, we see him struggling to put what he is learning in context and to justify why he is pursuing a PhD in physics, even though there are no academic positions available to physics PhDs today. I mean, they produce 100 times more than the academic system can absorb. So that means that they're going to have to rebrand themselves at some point. In the video that I posted, he compares David Griffiths' undergraduate text to Jackson's graduate text in E&M. And he concludes that they cover the same topics. The only difference is that Jackson offers much lengthier, more opaque explanations and makes the problems much more difficult. So I know of one person who fully mastered Jackson, and he is a 70-year-old Russian accelerator physicist who was fully aware of the layers of unnecessary complexity of the system of instruction. And I think that in a rebellious move, he encouraged his student to challenge physics dogma with a physics document composed primarily in words. His counterpart within the US wrote a response to this challenge, that was composed almost exclusively in equations, the coded language of physics. Such is the price of admission to the higher mysteries. But is it worth the price? I don't think so. I think it's all just a silly game. And I see the problem of a theory of everything as a problem of deliberately terrible teachers, deliberately terrible heuristics. Just look at quantum mechanics. I mean, it's ridiculous. Smoke and mirrors, no-go theorems, and deliberately compartmentalized instruction that is encoded via complexity. I think that the simplest way to extract ourselves from the mess we have made is to drop our egos and our paranoia and look back to physics from before the world wars. They already had a theory of everything back then, and the only problem today is that modern physicists so often don't understand it enough to connect their encoded, compartmentalized languages to the languages that came before them and understand where the roots of all of the terms come from. We end up with parallel systems, parallel languages that are inconsistent with each other because their axioms are different, yet the people using them are not aware of that. How awful is that? And yet these two groups of people think they're speaking the same language, but they're not. I think that instead of studying quantum chromodynamics, a useless invention, people should be studying things like tops and vorticity. And if we drop our egos then about these matters and get more grounded in our educational system, then we will see that our problems do not require more ego to solve, rather they require less ego. Because egos make people unable to look around their blind spots or to even acknowledge their blind spots. And it often takes a lot of confidence to throw your ego away and look at your blind spot. While I respect people who try to build their own new theory of everything in their own private language, and then to show how a simple pattern underlies all of the particles detected in colliders over the years, I can't help but view all of these efforts as yet another set of smoke and mirrors that distract from the more fundamental problem of compartmentalization, excess complexity, and emperors with no clothes. As in the movie The Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. While I do not think that my friend, who has a theory of everything, or that Garrett are laying claim to more knowledge than they have, like the Wizard of Oz, I do think that they are both making an ad hoc addition to the standard model that doesn't add predictive power. It just adds a layer of narrative complexity and comfort. Their concepts may be more comforting than the overly complex approach of string theory, but they both seem to fill the same niche, holding the attention of ambitious young men in a sort of trance, hypnotized. You lead them to their hamster wheel and they start running, and they just keep running till they die. You don't have to worry about them anymore. The message conveyed to everyone else is, don't worry, we've got it all figured out. Carry on. And I'm not sure that such messages are necessary, true, or kind. But I could be wrong about that. Kids like to feel that the world is all sorted out in a religious sense. But why must physics play the role of religion? And don't such assurances channel our sense of wonder into strange directions, which cause us to put more people on hamster wheels and cause them to build nonsense? I mean, if we break, just to think of like Jeff Bezos's dream of getting everybody out into space. Is it worth the cost? I mean, think of all of the lives that would be spent working themselves to death to get to that point, when, we already have a really nice planet. This could be paradise on Earth. Right now, we don't have to kill ourselves with nonsense to try to build some imaginary paradise in the future. That's my opinion. I think that religion has historically inspired many wonderful communal productions of art and music, while physics inspires none of that. And that makes me sad when we divert all of our resources towards technical pursuits. I am frankly appalled at the lack of musical and artistic talent at the local college track, technically oriented high school where my kids go. My daughter is bored out of her mind there, and she says that the music class is intolerable. So this is worrisome to me because, and I believe her because I've walked past that school many times, and what do I hear? I hear this drum beat. Like the teacher is trying so hard to get all of these kids on a single wavelength, to break through the noise and get them to beat drums in sync. And that's as far as the music gets. I mean, that's sad. That's the saddest song I've ever heard. It really is. I walk past this technical high school and I hear their music class, and it is thunk, 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 thunk. It's unbelievable. And then my daughter comes home and just starts singing. Just, all the songs she's heard through her phone. And she used to love to draw when she was in preschool, of course, when she was younger, but she comes home from art class and the picture she drew was of a distorted, melting corporate logo. I mean, if this is the expression of our children's soul at the moment, I think we need to rethink how we're investing things, because at the moment, Amazon is a company that is sucking energy from things like the publishing industry, which is an industry founded on artistic expression. They're sucking energy from art and redirecting it into STEM subsidies for rockets and dreams of moving to the moon. And I think this has been done across the entire economy ever since the World Wars, when the Cold War started and everyone tried to race the other countries to automate faster and better. And I think, of course, we're coming to the limits of that. And there's an article I wrote called Accelerating Towards a Bottleneck that I recommend about this. But if you prefer more whimsical treatment, I recommend my novels. I find that you can say things through fiction that are almost impossible to say directly. So thank you for watching. Until next time, please tune in for my next videos.